So this is going to be a tutorial on how to deploy a Django application onto a Windows server using IIS. So in front of you, or in front of me, I have a simple web app. It has a form, has some inputs, and it saves data to a database, outputs that data, and has the option to download that data into Excel. So pretty straightforward, nothing complicated. I have the web app running right now. I'm going to turn this off since I don't need it. Alright, so I have the web app encode and everything on GitHub. So I'll post a link to the in the description so you can download this. But basically, I've outlined some steps here so that you can follow along and deploy this web app onto a Windows VM or a Windows server. So the first thing that you'll need to do is create a VM. I'll be using Google Cloud Platform. I'll create an instance, change the OS to Windows, and then what I'll be using will be the Windows Server 2019 Data Center. I'm going to hit cancel and cancel again because I already have a VM running. So I'm just going to open up that VM and get started. Okay, so now I have my VM ready. I'm going to minimize this. I'm going to open up Internet Explorer, and what I want to do first is install a new web browser because I don't like using Internet Explorer. Alright, so I have a web browser that I want to use. The first thing that I want to do is download and install Git Bash. And this is simply just to allow me to download my Git repo and just make the experience on the Windows command prompt a little easier. Alright, now that Git Bash is installed, I'm going to try to download my project repo. And I'm actually going to save it right on the desktop. Alright, so I have my project here. I need to edit some of these files. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to install Visual Studio Code. Alright, so I've navigated to my GitHub repo, and I'm just going to follow along the steps that I've outlined here. So the first thing to do is install IIS on the VM. So on here, what I can do is, let me see if I remember how to do this. Add roles and features. Next. Next. Next, I want to click on Web Server IIS, add features. Next. 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 And what I need to install is IIS. So under Application Development, you're going to scroll down and hit CGI. Make sure that's chosen because this is what will be needed in order to have our Django web app to run. And finally install. Once installation is complete, just close the window and you can minimize that. Alright, so we have IIS installed and we have CGI. The next thing to do is to copy our web project over to this directory, inet webroot. So I'm going to open up the directory, local C, inet webroot, or www-root. You can delete these files. Continue. And I'm just going to copy that over here. Continue. Alright. So I'm going to open the folder up with Visual Studio Code. And again, that's because I need to make a few edits. Alright, to first make things a little clearer and what we're going to be editing and why, I'm going to go to Google and search for Django Windows IIS. And the basic steps that I'm going to be taking are going to be outlined in this article, Configure Python Web Apps for IIS. There should already be a link in the description here, otherwise I'll include it. But there is some settings here that need to be included for your Django web project. Most of the settings have already been applied in my project, but I'll kind of try to explain what needs to be edited. Alright, so the first thing to begin with is that here is a web config template, and after we're done editing this is going to be turned into a web.config file that will sit outside of our project directory. So the first thing that we need to do is, we need to install Python 3.7. So let's search for download Python. And I'm going to use 3777. And actually, I'm going to cancel this. I'm going to run it as administrator. I want a custom install, and I'm going to put Python right on the C drive so it's easy to access. So now that Python's installed, I am going to install my libraries. So I'm going to have a file here. It's called install-requirements.bat. I'm going to need wfastcgi, but I'm not going to need mod whiskey, so I'm going to delete that. Just for reference, this mod whiskey was for a separate tutorial, not relevant here. So the next thing that I need to do is go to this web project, and actually I'm going to just type in cmd to open up the terminal and install requirements.bat. Alright, so now that my libraries have been installed, I'm going to check the next step, and the next step is to navigate to the C drive, go to the Python 3.7, edit the properties and security settings to allow IIS app pool, default app pool. So here is where my Python install is sitting. I'm going to go to properties, security, edit, add, IIS app pool, default app pool. And this default app pool is just something that IIS creates. It basically runs your application, and so you need to give it permission to Python and your project so that it can run your application. Allow, apply, OK. The next thing to do is to enable WFast CGI. So what we need to do is open up a terminal, run it as administrator, and run the line WFast CGI enable. So I'm going to close this terminal, open up a new one. I'm going to right click on the terminal and select run as administrator. Alright, so the command that I want to run is WFast CGI enable. Okay, that's not working. Let's look up Python WFast CGI. Okay, I misspelt it. Cool. So what it returned was this Python path. And we'll need to use this to update our config file. So back in Visual Studio Code, you want to open up this web config template. Go to the line that says script processor and paste in that value. Other values that need to be updated include the Python path, and that should point to your project directory. If your project doesn't happen to sit in www.root, make sure you update that path to wherever the project's sitting. The next thing is the WSGI handler, and this can just easily be found in the WSGI.py file. So, for example, if you go to under web project, WSGI.py, you can find the application right there. Similarly, for the Django settings module, that is simply your web project and then the settings. So right here, this settings.py file. An additional web config file will also be needed, and I've already included it here in my static directory. And this should just contain these settings without any editing. So don't make any modifications to this web config file. Alright, so this web config template is ready, and I'm just going to rename it to web.config. And let's look back at the steps that are needed. Close out these extra tabs. Alright, so we enabled WFast CGI. We've edited our web config template and renamed it web.config. However, right now it's not sitting in this path. It's sitting in our web project directory, so I'm going to copy it and move it to www.root. So I'm going to cut, go to www.root, and paste. Great. And this is the location that Windows IIS will be looking for our config file. That's why I need to paste it there. The next thing that I need to do is open the IIS manager and enable handlers there. So I'm just going to click on this server, click on Configuration Editor, look for System Web Server, and then Handlers. There we go. And you just want to select Unlock Section. And the reason for that is because our web config file is creating a handler. Alright, the next step is to add a virtual directory, and that will actually be for our site. So over here you should add something that says default site, default website, or something similar. And what you need to do is right click on that and add virtual directory. And this will be for our static files. Now that we have that set up, I'm going to navigate on the terminal to inet, root, and our web project. Now I'm going to need to call on manage.py to collect our static files. Actually, before I do that, let me double check the settings py file. Okay, a few things. You want to add the local path. If you're just running this on a local VM, just enter something like that, or localhost. Since I'm running this on the Google Cloud Platform, I'll need my IP address. And for me, that's this number right here. So I'm going to copy that and paste it. I'm going to change debug to false. And scroll all the way to the bottom to change my static root. Alright, so now when I call collect static, it should paste all my static files into the static directory. Alright, so I can inspect that everything was pasted in here. You can see that this is all in green, and this is just Git identifying any changes. Close that out. I don't think I need to make any more changes, but I'll keep Visual Studio open just in case. Alright, the next thing to do is to refresh the server and navigate to localhost. And you can just do this over here. So click on the default web server website or whatever you have this called, and click restart. And then I'm just going to open up a private window. And you can see that my web application is now being served. I'm just going to test this out. Oh, we have a server 500 error. I wonder why that is. Server 500 error. Let me see. I'm just going to check the settings here. I might need to add IIS app pool default app pool. The issue might be that IIS app pool might only have permissions to read and not modify. Since I'm saving to a database, I need to give it right permissions. Alright, so I'm going to restart the server, and then I'm going to navigate to localhost again and try this again. And you can see that fixed it. So I have this additional record made on May 12th. And to test it out again, 456. See that I can continually add on to that. And you can see that I could also download my data as an Excel workbook. The last thing that I want to show you is how to serve this to the public. So the first thing we need to do is look at our firewall settings. Let's go to advanced settings. Go to inbound rules, and we're going to add a new rule. Select port, type in port 80, and I'm just going to call this World Wide Web allow access. I'm just going to restart our server. Minimize this window. I'm just going to minimize the VM. So here on my local machine, I'm going to navigate to this external IP address. Actually, sometimes this works faster if I just open up a new private tab. And you can see here that I have my web application. You can see that the two edits that I've made are also included in here, acknowledging that everything is working again. Cool. Alright, so that's those are the basic steps to getting your Django web application to run on Windows IIS. Thanks.